Genji is currently one of only 2 teams that have already made it through the Swiss stage at Worlds. They've been playing cleanly, Lehends has been a big part of that, and especially in this game where their bot lane had a real 1v9 performance. I think Lehends and On and Delight are the best supports in the world right now, so I thought it would be a good idea to cover some high-level support gameplay in this mini break from World. I'm going to be going over early game in depth to really get a sense for how the game developed, how it did, and then we're going to have a look at some later fights. So let's jump into it. I want to quickly mention the rune setup here. So this is a pretty standard setup, except for Demolish over here. You're going to notice this in pro play. You shouldn't take this in your own games. This is because in pro games, people are going to be lane swapping to get out of tricky matchups or to protect the opponents from getting out of tricky matchups. So you'll see a lot of melee supports take Demolish. I think the thought process behind Leona taking Demolish is Leona is really scary in lane, and sometimes people are going to swap away from her, so then if Leona has Demolish and she's demolishing plates in bot tower, then she's going to be in a really good spot. We're going to pay a little bit of attention to the numbers that bone plating puts out during the game. Spoiler alert, it's horrible. Be careful about taking this rune yourself. And the last thing I want to talk about before we start playing this replay is the 2v2 matchup here. Now, fortunately, this is a game where there aren't any lane swaps, so we can actually talk about what should happen. So the way that this 2v2 interacts is Kai'Sa and Leona are going to win the extended all-ins quite hard. Kai'Sa has press the attack versus fleet footwork. Kai'Sa has her passive. Kai'Sa is not limited to 4 auto attacks at a time like Jhin is, so she's going to outperform an extended all-in. Leona is the best extended all-in melee support as well. She has a really short Q cooldown. If she can get 2 or even 3 Qs off, then it's just going to be a winning fight and you're probably going to die. So on one side we have the all-ins, and then on the other side we have a little bit more range, a little bit more utility, a little bit more scaling, especially from the Rel side. So let's see if Genji's bot lane can find windows to extend a fight and kill them, and whether top esports can find ways to use their superior utility and range, and especially the scaling with Rel. Because if Rel can get through laning phase, even with Leona, then her engages can be absolutely terrifying, as I'm sure you have seen plenty of this world. And Rel has the tools to get through a Leona lane because of Rel's W. If she uses her W well, it's going to easily prevent Leona from finding her second Q. It's just going to be hard for Rel to be proactive herself. Alright, let's have a look at what happens. Not going to pay too much attention to level 1 because each team is going to have their scouts for their team and their strategies, and maybe they want to protect a certain ward that the enemy team has a tendency to go for, or they want to protect against a lane swap. What I think should happen, if this was more of like a solo queue game, or you knew that everyone was starting in the bot lane, I would love for there to be some kind of contest around the mid bush here, because whoever gets mid bush, it's going to be very important for them. I think especially for Rel, if she could find a ward here to get information if Leona is going to be starting here herself, then Rel can look to dismount W into this bush and really take control of the lane. However, in this game, we're not going to see that. We're going to see some standard spreading and some defending around this corridor here. Okay, so we're going to get into the lane. And this is where I think that top esports is already dropping the ball. Now, the thing about Rel is that she can have quite scary level 1 trades against other melee champions. When she is dismounted, you can see she gets her shield, but look at all of these stats that she gets as well. She gets armor and magic resist, she gets attack speed, she gets attack range, she gets her shield. So a lot of times as Rel, what you want to do is, like I said, look to dismount in this bush, especially if you have information, and control mid bush, and then you can remount after an initial trade. But what happened is, I think Rel was just defending way too long around here. I don't think it was necessary to stand that long, and so Rel has traded a little bit of potency to be able to control mid-bush and contest for that early prio, and Leona is just given complete free access to mid-bush here. And there's the first instance of bone plating being absolutely useless. A random Jhin Q procs it, and then it's not going to do anything. But right now it's basically a race for level 2. Rel has already dismounted, so she is not going to have the threat to kind of dismount into this bush and push Leona out. If Rel tries to face check, Leona can like auto Q auto and then back off, so Leona's sitting pretty. And what should happen here is I think the level 2 should be pretty close. I think Jhin spamming Q is going to do a lot of shove. But Kai'Sa is also capable of shoving quite hard and spamming Q. That just doesn't end up happening. What Kai'Sa ended up doing here is not pressing Q immediately on cooldown. I'm not really sure why they're not really contesting for that level 2 prio. It's not like their jungler is clearing away from them and then they need to be defensive and keep the wave on their side or anything like that, and I think their level 2 spike would be terrifying. It could also be nerves, or maybe I'm missing something with their game plan, but for whatever reason, Gen G is going to basically concede level 2 here. And now it's just about giving level 2, respecting the level 2 spike, making sure that you at the very least stay in XP range for all of these minions on the second wave, but you need to be ready to concede some last hits. Now with that said, PES trolls out of his mind. He's running forwards here, trying to get into Q range to last hit this minion as they are predictably hitting level 2. And this is just a disgusting mistake from PES. He loses both of his summoners, he gets chunked. And this is something that I teach my low elo students consistently, about understanding how to use or respect the level 2 spike. Pros consistently make basic errors, don't fool yourself otherwise. But this is especially a big deal in this lane because it's going to hamper Gen G's ability to find their extended all-ins, which they really want. Now, Kai'Sa has no flash, no cleanse. It's going to be harder to follow up and extend that fight. And if they can't do that, then a lane like this is just going to be useless and low range and get outscaled. So now that Gen G is kind of like stuck under their tower and Jin just gets to shove as much as he wants, Leona is never going to be able to access the bushes. And if Leona can control a bush, especially mid-bush, that's really powerful. We kind of saw that on the first wave. Even if she get into this bush here, then she can actually have some threat to jump onto the Jin with her E and not really be in vision, and just exert a lot more pressure. So Gen G is in a really rough spot after the first 2 waves, which is a bit disappointing because I think that Leona just has so much threat. She can and should force an opportunity to find that extended all-in with at least 2 Qs. So very little for Leona to do on this window now. We're just going to be staying healthy and catching minions. And maybe when our jungler is on our side of the map and our jungler is looking to do something, we can use his proximity. Now this is professional play, this is at the highest level, so it's very unlikely that the enemy team is just going to let the Maokai get a gank off for free. But I wanted to mention this wave again because this is an opportunity for us to actually regain control of a bush. The enemy bot lane here recently peeled off, right? We can expect that they probably warded in the tri-bush or in the dot bush over here to cover for a gank. That gives us some space to actually take over a bush. And finally, look to force an extended all-in trade. If we can find an E onto the Jin into a Q, and then we're running forwards, and then we're finding another Q, it's going to be favorable. Even this Rel with no flash, if she steps up too far and we just start stacking Qs on her, she's going to be in a world of hurt. So my issue with how this lane is playing out for PES and Lehends is that we're just playing way too defensive with the strongest melee support in the game. And the only thing that I will say on that front is it is Worlds, it's the international stage, people's nerves could be playing a big part. But I do think that Leona is going to be rewarded for stat checking and is not really finding those opportunities. And then what happens is Jackie gives us an E, which is definitely a misplay from the Jin. Now, if you're a range champion and you're getting hit by a Leona's E from out in the open without her flashing, you are probably misplaying unless you really want to get hit by it. But we're going to get an appreciation of both Leona's short, concise trade strength and the threat of her second Q. So we're going to find the E into Q onto the Jin, and then we're running forwards, and the threat of our next Q is so high that Rel has to W defensively, and she's going to make sure that Leona can't get that second Q off. That's preventing Rel from jumping forwards and really putting some pressure onto the Kai'Sa. Now this trade never should have happened. Jackie just misstepped, and Leona was able to punish it very well. So now there's a bit of a target on both Jin's head because he's chunked now, and always on Rel's head because she has no flash. And then just a bit more context for this window. The enemy bot lane dropped a ward in here in the recent past, and then we swept it out. And this is, this is a pro game. People are going to know the threat of the junglers being here. So the fact that their body language is still kind of like actively staying around, even though us as Leona, we're kind of shifting forwards and looking to engage, it's quite telegraphed in my opinion that the enemy Sejuani is probably going to be here as well. But Lehends says it doesn't matter. We have so much burst damage. That's another part of Leona's strength in the early game, is that she has a lot of damage tied to her passive, a lot of base damage. And then we just get to kind of one-shot the Rel. The only issue with this play was that we didn't just get the kill on the Rel and then immediately back off. So let's one-shot the Rel. Nothing more we're going to get done, right? We should be backstepping right now. But what happens is we're just kind of running forwards on this window, so we're going to be more out of position. And then that's going to cost us our flash. But it's not the end of the world. We still got that one-shot kill. And now the priority is going to shift to just trying to find a crash into base so that we can heal up and spend our gold. But this is something that we're going to notice throughout the whole game, is that the threat of our skirmishes with these three champions, and even with the Yone here as well, is so incredibly high that you're really going to see the Leona be activated when she has teammates with her. So we're finding that crash into base. Cool. And now this is a window that I wasn't the biggest fan of what Lehends decides to do. So we have a few options, right? The first option is we can kind of like path out of base with our Maokai, but the issue is our Maokai is doing his topside camps now. There's no top scuttle, there's no grubs or anything like that. So there's going to be very little to do if we're going to be active on top river on this window. What I would prefer is that we go back towards bot. We generate a window of priority, which we should be able to do because our Kai'Sa got the kill and we're probably going to be up an item and we're going to be winning the 2v2 right now. So let's shove a wave and then let's shift up the map and then shove mid and then let's shift up and then we'll be up around topside for Herald. Now what ends up happening instead is that we're just like immediately beelining towards topside of the map with very, very little to do. We're pretty much homeless on this window. I think this is too early to be active on the map. Kind of running around, poking our head, seeing where, you know, the enemies could be. And I'm sure you can appreciate that what we could have done is just brute force some prio here, force the enemy to respond to that wave there, and then move up with our ADC, and then get mid prio and then move up if we really want to contest grubs as much as possible. Again, not the end of the world, but I thought that was very strange for a team of this caliber. So now what's going to happen is there's just going to be like a standoff for getting mid prio so that we can have the first move to grubs. And this is one of the first instances that I'm going to bring up where mid gap is just going to be a big deal. In my mind, what Lucian achieves in a draft is that he dominates 1v1, right? He should have a huge CS lead, HP lead, shove lead, anything like that. But he's going to get outperformed in a team fight or in a skirmish by the Yone, especially in like a 3v3 or 4v4 scenario. But none of that is true, right? He doesn't have an item advantage. He doesn't have a significant shove advantage. He doesn't have an HP advantage. The Yone is very healthy. So come this skirmish, these four champions are just going to heavily outperform top esports 4 champions. And this is basically just going to be a draft gap, right? Like the Sejuani and the Lucian make very little sense together, and then they're just trying to take even number fights, which they're never going to win. So then what Lehends does is he's going to sit in a bush, and this is something we're going to notice quite a bit through this game as well. He's going to sit in a bush, he's going to be, you know, denying the enemy team information, he's going to find a creative engage and really get the ball rolling. And then, for whatever reason, top esports just feels compelled to contest this, and we're just going to come out really ahead. So we'll break down this fight a little bit more, but before that I want to draw our eyes to what a great job that Pays did on the Kai'Sa here. It might seem obvious that top esports shouldn't have contested due to Kai'Sa, you know, shoving and then not showing, but this is the vision from top esports. Kai'Sa managed to stay in fog the whole time, all the way around here, and then they could have been a little bit more surprised. But anyway, I really like how Lehends is just happy to dump all of his spells onto the Sejuani, onto the tank here. And this is a bit of a common misconception. People in lower elo, they often say, you know, don't focus the tanks. But the tanks are out at the front, right? You can't just focus whoever you want. So I really appreciate that he decisively went onto the Sejuani. Even if you don't get the one shot on the Sejuani, she's effectively dead, right? There's nothing more that she's going to be able to do in this fight. And then one more perspective from the skirmish, Leona getting that second Q. So we're going to hex flash forwards, find all of our spells, then be sprinting forwards, trying to find that second Q. That second Q is devastating. And just that little backstep there as well, so that we can dodge the knockup from the Rel, so that we can keep moving forwards. Great control, great awareness from Lehends. And so we get a kill there. And I really think that top esports needed to kind of reconsider everything. What Lucian is supposed to do in this draft, and if it doesn't go the way that it should go, then we can consider giving grubs and looking to traded for dragon and maybe some bot plates instead. So yeah, there was a bit of a mid gap here, and we can see the power that Yone versus the Lucian had in this skirmish. Lucian just doesn't have the items, he doesn't have any threat. This was just genuinely disgusting by Cream dashing forward on the back end. There was 0% chance he's ever going to get a kill on. This is a win trade. This is disgusting. So he's going to get punished. He's going to die. I'm hoping for a competitive ban for him there. But anyway, let's take a little bit of stock of what's been going on so far. I think we slightly underperformed in the 2v2. I think we too readily gave over the level 2 spike. We too readily gave over every bush control. We never found a 2v2 window to inject volatility. Now that might be how they're approaching the game, right? They want to be structured. They want to limit variance. They really want to play together. But at the end of the day, we are Kaiser Leona, and we really have that strong extended all-in. Otherwise, we've done a fantastic job of using Leona's skirmish power alongside the rest of her threatening team. Now, this following window, it's going to be another sloppy moment from Lehends. I'm very surprised that we just base here. And the reason for that is our jungler is active on top side here, and there's going to be a call made to go top soon. And even though we're very low, just being near for a fight can make all the difference in the world. So let's get to that moment. Right now, we're just going to be trying to shove. And then, you know, if nothing's going to happen, we can base. But, you know, of course, Maokai, Canyon, he's going to be communicating exactly what he wants here. I think Leona should be sprinting up here and matching a potential skirmish. Now, the reason that I think that is because you really need to be bloodthirsty as a support. Your tempo does not matter. That's something that I try to instill in my students the whole time. There's basically no cost to just moving up and pressuring with your pressuring teammates. We're not going to look at this fight right now, but just look at Leona. So our teammates made a play, and now we're coming out of the base, and we're so homeless right now. Like, there's literally nothing for us to do because our teammates who were active on the map are now off the map. So why not just pressure with them on that window, and then you guys can back off together, and then you can pressure the map together. Because like I said, right now there's absolutely nothing for Leona to be doing. Now let's have a look one more time quickly at this fight. Leona moving up here. Let's pretend that we're moving up, linking up with our Maokai over here, and then we're with our Maokai, and then we're pinging on the way, and then we get our E. We get all of our spells off. That's going to make all the difference in a skirmish like this. Or at least that should be our first instinct, to move to this and then kind of back off after. So in my mind, a few fundamental macro errors and movement errors from Lehends in this early game. Oh, and by the way, let's check in on bone plating. We're at 35 damage reduced in 7.5 minutes so far. So go second wind. Like we said on this window, there's nothing for us to do because we're off tempo from the rest of our team. So we're just going to kind of posture menacingly around mid. That's fine. We're just going to try to staunch each other off of this bush. And we end up coming out ahead on that front. Now this is... I strongly dislike this ping. This is a really, really bad ping for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's not in a creative enough spot to not get cleared easily, right? You don't want your ping to just get immediately cleared. If this ping could have found a home over here, or in any other kind of creative bush that people don't always check, then it could be a better ping. Or we should just place our pink in a bush that is on the edge of our control. Right? Like if we had a pink back here, I think we could protect that, and we can get great value in ensuring that this remains in fog. But this is just going to get immediately cleared as soon as someone steps in the vicinity. And so that's basically what happens. Ral just, of course, is walking through this area, clears the pink gets 0 value. Not much for us to do on this window. Now taking stock on the broader picture right now, what happens, or what is happening, is that our Maokai is just trying to clear some camp. He made a play top, it didn't work out. He needs some downtime now to put his camps on cooldown. All of his bot camps are going to be up soon. But at the same time, we have such a better comp for skirmishing and for fighting on neutrals, ignoring top for a second, that if we can find a way to contest Dragon, I think us, like in a 4v4 setting, we're in such a better spot that that's what we would want to do. Now, if the call is Canyon saying, hey guys, I'm not going to be active on the map for a while, we're probably going to have to give Dragon and just farm up on this window, that would be totally fine. But instead, why don't we just place our ward, a green ward over here to get some information on the chickens or even on the red buff here. Don't put our pink here, and then be ready to trade, right? Like maybe we give bot side and then we take top side, and we can get chickens, and we can get red, and we can stack a wave, and then we can kind of dive top. Or we can let our Maokai clear down, put his camps on cooldown, and then we can just get a little bit more valuable information. But what ends up happening is we waste our pink ward, and then we waste our green ward. Like this green ward's not going to do anything, right? It's not going to tell us if Sejuani is going to be on this side of the map, or if Sejuani is going to commit to bot side of the map. And so now this whole window is just kind of going to collapse for Genji, and we're not going to get anything done. We're not going to stack a top wave. We're not going to be aware of the map state of Sejuani just hard committing to bot side. And now that we're approaching level 6, what I will say for Leona level 6 is that you should always be happy to trade your ult for an ADC's cleanse if an important neutral objective isn't on the map, right? So you're looking to trade your ult for their cleanse because it's a shorter cooldown, so that when an important fight is coming up, then the enemy ADC doesn't have cleanse and you have a lot more threat. Otherwise, here we're going to get another instance of Lehends being creative, finding an engage from Fog, kind of reading the body language as well, and Jackie Love kind of inting a little bit. So we get an E from a bush onto the Jhin. We're going to trade our ult for his cleanse, and a chunk, which is always going to be worth. Now we're in a really good spot for any fight in the future. But right now, given that we didn't get to stack a top wave and then dive with our Maokai, and instead we cleared and gave Dragon and just kind of butchered this whole window. There's not much for us to do right now, so we're just going to back off. We're going to refill our wards, and then we're probably going to look to contest this upcoming second grub spawn, which our team is going to be in a great spot to contest. So back out onto the map. We're going to make sure that this area is in fog. Good sweeper, good pink. Not a fan of these two wards right next to each other, but it is what it is. Pro supports are horrible at using their wards with intent. It's always been a bit of a gripe that I've had for as long as pro play has existed, but I'll try to move on from that. So now it's going to be quite similar to the first grubs spawn, where there's going to be some posturing to get mid prior so that you can move first into the river so that you can control the river for the upcoming neutral objective. And now we're going to get the first introduction of a gigantic top gap. So we were saying that any kind of 3v3 or 4v4 for Genji is going to be wildly favorable with the draft differential. But if we bring top into the equation, Rumble is going to much outperform a mini Gnar. So what ends up happening is our Gnar is just kind of stuck under tower, and then Rumble is going to be roaming up predictably and freely. And then we just kind of hang around. Now, I don't mind hanging around too much. If we want to just kind of posture on the fringes and maybe smite one of the grubs and then just kind of get out because their Rumble is sprinting up, that's totally fine. But Genji make a couple of really big errors. We get a cheeky smite steal, but Gnar is still kind of sprinting up, right? Like, this fight is never going to be a thing because Gnar is a little bit chunked. He's much slower than Rumble. Rumble is almost already here, and he has his long-range ult. Gnar is never going to be Mega Gnar in this fight either. So smite this, get out, let Gnar keep shoving and putting some pressure on bot here. But for whatever reason, people just don't really know how to give up neutral objectives or trade appropriately in the right circumstance, and then Canyon just walks forwards and dies for fun. So I think that we've really set the scene for how this game is going to pan out. Genji is looking to group up and dominate in 3v3 or 4v4 skirmishes. Top Esports is basically screwed, but if they can use their Lucian to try and get some side prio and disrupt Genji's powerful skirmishing composition, then they're going to be in a good spot. They also need to use the strength of this Rumble. Rumble needs to shove in on 1v1 and then move towards neutral objectives and just carry through that. Right now I'm going to pay more attention to just skirmishes and team fights and less macro. And this is where Lehends starts to really shine with his execution on Leona. So what's going to happen here is we're going to find a creative engage angle again, and we're going to be very decisive on the trigger pull. So we found a way to be creative in fog. There's no vision around here. And then we notice the enemy Sejuani, and what we're going to do is just immediately jump onto the Sejuani. Zero hesitation. We're going to kind of body block, stand over here so that Sejuani can't queue through this wall. We're also punishing Sejuani having no flash. I absolutely love the decisiveness here. We have our even number skirmishes, which is just way too much threat for the enemy to deal with, right? Their terrifying Rumble is just down bot here. So beautiful, decisive engage from Lehends and from Genji. I'm going to look at it one more time, but I want to talk about the order of Leona's spells here. We're going to go E, and we're going to have a lot of confidence that the E is not going to get dodged or interrupted, or Sejuani's not going to have the time to react to immediately try and Q over the wall. Otherwise, our ult would miss. So we throw E into ult, and then we're going to be holding Q. See, we haven't used Q. We're holding Q, and then we're going to Q to chain CC perfectly. What I would see a lot is just kind of like ER into immediate Q and a lot of overlap of the CC. So Lehends' Leona, mechanics is really good to see. And just really abusing this draft gap. Like, this Sejuani cannot skirmish with this Lucian. They have no synergy together. So that was great. Let's move on to the next fight here. And I had a bit of an issue with this fight, actually. So there's a time and place to dump all of your cooldowns onto the tank, right? And this is a big commitment from us to drop our Q and our E and our ult onto a Sejuani who isn't really that out of position, right? So first of all, ignoring the Rumble, just absolutely annihilating us here. The Sejuani is much less out of position than she was before. So if we use all of our cooldowns on the Sejuani here, then the rest of the enemy team carries are just going to be able to do a lot of damage on the back. Now I need to talk about this gigantic top gap that is making the game so hard for Gen G to play. What is this Gnar doing? Let's shove this wave. We got our Mega. Let's peel off. Let's look to TP to the upcoming Herald fight, and then we can play from there. But he kind of walks back to maybe TP. And then he's just completely dizzy. He's not running forwards with his Mega bar to try and interrupt a TP from the Rumble and keep Rumble locked in lane here. So that's a 4v4 over here. And then he TPs after 5 or 10 seconds delay after his Mega Gnar has worn out. So this is really disgusting to see, honestly. So Rumble TPs first. Rumble gets a gigantic ult. The fight has kind of been dictated before this little mini Gnar can get here. So there was a lot of pressure on Gen G's 4 players here to kind of carry the fight before this whole thing erupted. I think what needed to happen is Gnar stop getting gapped so hard and just TP faster and allow himself to get carried easier. Or Gen G understand what's going on here and they just play this a little bit slower or a lot slower. They don't commit so many resources onto the Sejuani right now. Maybe we just find a Leona Q. We're playing slower, we're backing off, we're not getting Rumble, a gigantic ult here. We're allowing a bit of a 50-50 contest between the junglers for the Herald, and then once there's a better angle, then we can look to use our E and our R as Leona. Because we're only going to get one crucial E and R in a skirmish, right? And if we're dumping it onto the Sejuani, that's a huge commitment. So I prefer to play it slow here, and then when the right moment presents itself, we're going to E flash into R onto one of the carries, with the follow-up from Yone and Maokai, because that's how our skirmishing is so scary, right? We have so much threat, so much follow-up, so much damage. So yeah, let's peel off of this. Maybe we can focus on Jhin getting TP'd on by the Gnar, which we can kind of chase forwards, or just play it a lot slower. I thought this window was pretty awful from Gen G. And then the fight has already been dictated. We're not going to learn too much from the back end. We can just see how it turns out. But it was always going to be a bit of a coin flip from how bad the start of the fight was. And we're going to see another example of how decisive Lehends is on Leona here. We notice some numbers topside. We're going to be shoving mid. And then we're just going to absolutely send it onto the Jhin here. Now again, JackeyLove is inting. He is walking into range of Leona's E when Leona's just standing in front of him. This is really disgusting, but a good punish from Lehends. And he's happy to trade his ult for the Jhin cleanse, and he ignites after Jin's cleanse as well, which is great to note. And it's extra impressive to me because finding mid dives is so risky and so difficult. The lane is too short for us to ever be able to stack a wave and have a big wave to give us more of an opportunity to dive. It's in the middle of the map, so it's easy for the enemy to respond to a mid dive wherever they are. But we did it so cleanly, so decisively, with the help of a little bit of inting from JackeyLove, that we get to kill the ADC, get a huge chunk on mid tower, and then try to back off. So then, yeah, we're just trying to back off. We already did a great job. We killed the ADC. We got his cleanse as well, which is, fantastic for any upcoming fights. And then our boy Lehends decides to die for fun. He's going to walk forwards and hit this plant while he has no flash and he's chunked and his teammates are off the map. So that wasn't the best, but fortunately, it's not going to lead to any crucial neutral objectives going down. Now, eventually what happens is we end up breaking the mid-outer tower. And I want to stress how important this is because it makes it so much easier for us to shove the wave before the enemies can. and then we get to move away from the middle of the map first, and that allows us to make plays. So what happens here is we get a lot of space, a lot of control. We get a great mid ward over here as well, and then we have the first move to move wherever we want to. And what we are going to decide to do is to collapse on the rumble over here. So we're going to be moving down. We have already pinged that there's a ward over here, so we're looking to stay in fog as well. We're abusing our first move. And this is just such a fantastic call from Lehends or Genji's bot lane or whoever did, because Rumble is incredibly susceptible to getting collapsed on in the side, right? He's relatively squishy compared to most top laners. He is immobile. He has the most power when he can just group up with the rest of his team and make excellent use of his ultimate to swing neutral objective fights. But we're going to decisively collapse on the Rumble, denying information from the enemy team the whole time through this route, which was awesome. And then we get a pick there, so great stuff. And even if Rumble wasn't standing out in the open here and he was respecting this window a little bit more, I think Genji could have shoved his wave and just straight up dove. Right, there's so much threat with Kai'Sa's burst and following up with her R, and Leona's amazing lockdown and tankiness with her W and her aftershock, so just really good decision. Jumping forwards now, there's a little bit of contesting around for mid prio, but we have our mid outer when the enemy team doesn't, so we get the shove, we get to control the river, and we get to decide if we want to kill this dragon or not. Now what Lehends is going to do here is he's going to go on another creative flank. Now this isn't as necessary on Leona as some other champions. If you think about Alistar or Rel, their engage range is a lot shorter, so for them to find a creative engage or a flank to get onto the enemy carries can go a long way. Leona has her ult from range and her E, which allows her to get a little bit longer range as well. But still, a surprising engage is better than a predictable engage. So I love the creativity here. If they do end up contesting, then we have a fantastic angle here to just really jump forwards and lock down some of the enemy carries and then just blow them up. But Top Esports, for once, they make a good macro decision and they decide to give up the dragon. We get dragon, they get mid tower. We get control of the middle of the map. And we get the next mid wave. So that means that we can get top river next. But what we decide instead is to just use how much threat we have. And this window is going to be completely carried by Lehends' teammates, and especially Chovy. This is an amazing flank that he's found himself in with Fog. Jackie Love is doing a classic, kind of being up too far, and he's exposed. We have threat from the Yone here, and the Maokai here, and the Leona over here. This is going to be completely devastating. And then we ult the Jhin. And I think what needed to happen here is just to E-flash onto the Lucian. We really want to, lock a carry down, because you see here that he got Maokai rooted, right? So if we can find the E-flash here, and then we find the E-flash into the Q, into the Yone ult, then the Lucian's just going to get one shot as well. So we basically do nothing. We just kind of throw out an ult, and it gets cleansed, and then we're just running around here. So yeah, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. We got completely carried in this skirmish, but hopefully we can get an appreciation of kind of the comp diff in this moment. Lucian, completely useless. Sejuani's not going to have much synergy. She really wants these melee champs. And just great coordination and understanding what their team wants to do from Genji. So the game is basically already decided here. We're going to have so much map control. There's a gigantic comp diff. There's a gigantic mid diff. But anyway, let's look at one more fight for fun. Okay, so we're going to get a bit of mid prio here, and then with pressuring Baron, we have the first move. We're going to find another creative bush camp into finding an engage and just trying to one-shot the Sejuani. Much different situation from the other moment when Sejuani was kind of contesting the Herald around here, because her teammates were a lot closer to her. There was no surprise factor from our engage, and our Na was getting gapped really hard, right? But now we have the surprise. Their team is very split up, as we can see from the minimap over here. They're all over the place, and we actually have a top laner. The top laner is at a fight at a decent time, and he has his mega bar, and then we just get to kind of one-shot the Sejuani, and then all of our threat and all of our damage is just going to be way too much for the enemy team to deal with. And then we're just going to carry that into a pretty easy win. Okay, so I just want to do a quick summary of what we saw this game. What I thought that Lehends did really well is engaging from fog and from bushes. It's a bit of an intangible, but I can't overstate how important it is to deny the enemy team information to work with. What I also thought that Lehends did a great job with was just the order of his spells. Whenever he was in range to land an E, he didn't just panic Q into ult, right? He backed himself to be able to land his E and then his ult and then follow up with an Q afterwards to make sure that his CC gets spaced out. But also, and this is probably not going to come as any surprise, he understood their team's win con. Their team was such a cohesive unit this game. They understood what type of fights they wanted, how to set it up, and just really snowballed their draft and their mid gap. But yeah, Genji, you could tell from this game, is a well-oiled machine, and I think they're just going to look better and better as the tournament goes on, especially in best of 3, best of 5 formats. I doubt we will end up seeing this, but if Genji end up with bot lanes like this, or a champion like Leona, if they can inject more volatility that suits their champion's identity, rather than purely relying on the strategy and the macro, that would be cool to see. They probably won't. They are known for playing really slow and methodical and squeezing the map and team fights instead. Otherwise, for top esports, I thought their draft was awful. I thought this Lucian was just completely useless. So Lucian needed to stomp 1v1 and create a source of pressure on the side, and then Rumble needed to stomp 1v1, which he did, and then create a gap in neutral objective fights, which he did. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything else on the map to back up this Rumble, as top esports just completely disrespected the threat that Genji had for these skirmishes. Thank you for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting if you enjoyed the video. For world-class support, coaching, content, and community, go to wtl.lol/cupcake.